Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Spring Simulation Professionals of Texas meeting. We are really pleased that you're here to join us for this live meeting today. We are recording this meeting, and our speakers have also agreed that we can record their presentation. And so we are hoping and planning to have an upcoming cocktails and recording watch party in the near future. So that's something you can share with your colleagues and other simulationists who couldn't attend the meeting with us this morning. I'm Laura Tilkey. I'm the director of the Health Professions Learning Center at Texas Christian University and a member of the SPOT Planning Committee. We've been planning quite a bit for this upcoming year in 2021. And it's also my pleasure to introduce Karen Meadows, who is an advisory committee member and part of the leadership there, who has a few words to share about the future of SPOT before we get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome everyone. There may be some new faces in the group who haven't been to a SPOT meeting before, so I'd just like to mention who we are and what we do to start with. SPOT stands for Simulation Professionals of Texas, and we are a professional organization, and our goal is really just to get folks who work together in simulation for get folks together for networking, collaboration, sharing best practices, and those kinds of things. And so this organization is open to everyone that touches simulation. So it might be administrators, it might be faculty, facilitators, standardized patient educators, simulation technicians, just a whole range of people who work in and with simulation. So the SPOT committee, the governance structure, is made up of two separate committees, and we work collaboratively. There is an advisory board, and this is made up of, and you guys, if you will unmute just say hello, and then that way your picture will pop up for those who are watching in speaker view whenever I call your name. So Michelle Artigo.
Hi, everyone.
Jeremiah Averana. And then I'm Karen Meadows. And so that makes up your advisory board. The advisory board is the group that kind of sets the strategy for the coming year and is the support to the planning and oversight committee. The planning and oversight committee are the ones who set up the events. They make sure that that they're planned and executed. This is also the group that's in charge of communications. We have a website, we have social media, and so that's what that group is. So I'm going to call your names out as well, and if you'll just say hello. Erica Hinojosa.
Hi, good morning.
Brian Kuntz.
Good morning, everyone.
And Laura Tilkey.
Yes, hello again, everyone.
You can go ahead and advance. Okay, thank you. And so where SPOT is headed. So, Laura mentioned that we'd like to be we're glad to be back at least virtually, and COVID did kind of change some of the things that we were doing for just a little bit, but we've learned from this, and we're actually quite successful being able to use this virtual format now. We do hope to get back to in-person someday, because I know we're missing that networking. But if anything, we've learned that multiple formats is maybe a better way to go, and we can reach more people that way. And so we'll try to continue to do some of that. But certainly another future direction that we want to go in is we would really like to be able to establish SPOT as a nonprofit organization. So it takes a little bit of funds in order to do that. We need to be able to put forth our, document our governance structure, put together some bylaws and that kind of thing. And then we will need to pay some attorney's fees in order to make that happen. So we have set up a GoFundMe account to help raise some funds. We haven't charged anyone for membership fees for SPOT at all. And so this is just a way that we can be able to do some of the business that it requires a little bit of funding. We'd also like to be able to use some of those funds to attract speakers and pay honorariums and do other things related to communications and so forth. Our goal is to raise $1,000. We've received about a quarter of that right now, and we need about $500 in order to go ahead and move forward with the 501c3. So we're putting a link in the chat today, and I hope that you will consider, if just even a little bit, a few dollars even helps us a little bit, because it all comes together in one and helps further the cause. So I hope you'll consider that. We also have a QR code here that you can use, and I think this will pop up again at the end. So thank you. If you are contributing, we appreciate that. One other thing that we're doing is we're recruiting some new volunteers for our planning oversight committee. And so again, this is the group that sets up the meetings. And right now we're doing quarterly meetings. We hope to eventually get back to having a summer conference, and there may be some other opportunities along the way as well. But we certainly are looking for at least one or two people who could serve on this committee. The idea is that we turn over, and so we always keep a couple of people on the committee who have done it at least a year before, and then that way, as you're joining a group that's done it before and kind of knows what to expect. And then the following year, you would be that mentor to bring in a new group of people and show them what you've been doing and work together. So the requirements for these positions would be just to meet with other committee members. Right now, we're doing that all virtually. We pretty much have always done that virtually. And then to help plan and execute future spot meetings and other types of events that we may be doing, or helping with communications. This would be a 2-year appointment. And if you're interested in it, you can go to our website, which is right there, and we'll also put that in the chat as well. And there's a little link that you can click on to apply for this position. So I hope you'll consider joining. I think I'm excited about the future of SPOT right now and all the things that may be potential. And so I hope you are too, and you'll consider this. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're very pleased to move on to our presentation today, which is sponsored by Echo Healthcare. The title of today's presentation is Manikins Like Us, Facing the Challenges. And we do ask now that everyone would please mute their microphones. And of course, during this presentation, you're welcome to post any questions or comments in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. We'll make sure your questions get answered. And if time permits, at the end of the presentation, I'm sure the speakers will be happy also to take questions. And you're welcome to unmute at that time. It's truly our pleasure to introduce two amazing speakers today. We're so fortunate that they're joining us, and this is one of the benefits of a virtual meeting. First is Christina Starcevic, and she is joining us from Canada today. She is an accomplished medical professional who has a passion for saving lives through innovation, education, and technology. Throughout the last 20 years, Christina has held multiple positions in emergency medical care, including primary care paramedicine in a busy urban center, advanced care, and critical care paramedicine in both land ambulance and helicopter environments throughout the province of Ontario. Christina spent many years as a clinical educator and is an enthusiastic lifelong learner in the field of pre-hospital education. Christina has been a passionate advocate for medical simulation, having participated in research studies, ongoing education, and sales and business development. Christina is now a senior sales and BD executive for Echo Healthcare and counts many renowned institutions among her client and partner base. We also have with us today David Halliwell, and David is joining us from the United Kingdom. He is a UK-based paramedic. His career has flowed from a British military combat medic in the Falkland Islands, an NHS ambulance paramedic, clinical educator, and hospital-based resuscitation researcher, to roles also including senior academic fellow head of ambulance education, and strategic government advisor. He's literally obsessed with using realism in education. Dave seeks to help institutions and educators around the world to prepare for the worst. He has worked in many of the interesting areas of the Middle East to develop ambulance education strategies. This work includes working with the strategic command teams in Beirut prior to the 2020 explosion and developing strategies for the safe transport of patients with SARS and Ebola. David's research interests include developing new tools for the Internet of Things and understanding the interaction between learners and mannequins at an emotional level. Now working from Elstree Movie Studios in London, expect the unexpected.
Thank you so much. I think I'm just going to wait for David to pop up, and there he is, and he's going to launch his slideshow for us.
Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see it okay. Here we go. So thank you very much for the introduction this morning. I'm hoping everyone can hear okay. Please put your questions in the chat room below as we move forwards. It's really useful for us. It's a great privilege to be with you guys in Texas, and I was really excited at the thought of having cocktails with you at some point in the future. It would just be so fantastic to start traveling again. The UK we're still in lockdown. We're just coming out of it now, and it's a lovely sunny day. So hopefully you'll see a little bit of the sunshine today. So we're gonna crack on with the slides. I am very lucky. I've had an amazing clinical background, I suppose, and now these days I find myself working in Elstree Movie Studios, and that's where they made the original Star Wars movie. And on a daily basis now, we're involved with things such as the Crown television series, which is about the British royal family. I know that's quite popular out in the USA. So we are very privileged to be working there, but also I take a lot of the lessons that I learned from the movie industry and see how we can apply that back into our clinical practice. I'm going to be tag teaming with Christina, so every so often I'll take a drink of water and Christina will jump in, and we hope that isn't too off-putting as we go through today. I wanted to start with just a tiny little story about how we move along, I suppose, in the world of resuscitation research, simulation research. Almost 20 years ago, 2002, I started developing the Lucas chest compressor, which is now fairly well known around the world. And it took us just over 10 years for that product to become a standard piece of kit that people would accept. It took the initial 10 years just to prove that a mechanical device could be as good as a human being. And as a direct result of that piece of research, we've sort of gone forward in our thinking to now focus a lot more on ventilation and how we ventilate people. And it seems really strange to sort of start a session by saying, well, actually things are moving at such a pace now that the new tools that are coming out, especially in the world of ventilation, are helping us both refine physical performance, simulation performance, but also our actual clinical work. So I wanted to share a few lessons at the start of this presentation and a few pieces of equipment that we use that were maybe born in the world of simulation, but have now transcended into clinical practice. So on the left, you can see a T-piece being used on a tiny baby, and we built the babies. That's what I do. We make babies for movies, but we also make them for medical education. And we make them with realistic lung sizes, and we make them with realistic pressures. And, we're able to design these mannequins so that they're a lot more realistic than anything that's been made before. And once we started building realistic mannequins, we realized that the human skill required to squeeze a bag of mask to only introduce 3 mils of air, and then to adjust that to maybe squeeze in 5 mils of air in the next mannequin or the next size of mannequin up, was something that most clinicians just could not do. And the guidance around it says, well, squeeze until you see chest rise, but it doesn't really tell you when to stop squeezing. So if you're using a bag and mask, or if you're using a T-piece, then these human factors are actually starting to become quite a big deal, because we're creating pneumothoraces in tiny babies and we're affecting their cardiac output and doing a lot of damage. And so we were really lucky. We started working with a little team in Sweden who developed this thing called Monivent, which allowed us to measure exactly the amount of mils that we were putting in and out of every baby. And initially it was a simulation piece of equipment, and now it's gone clinical. We also have an adult version. And again, when we first started using it, I thought, okay, that's great. I can see what my tidal volumes are, and I can get some knowledge about that. But as I've gone forwards in my thinking, I've realized that I can actually personalize, really truly personalize a simulation event where the individual can now take out the learning to the point where they understand their perfect technique for them as an individual. So I'll show you a little bit of video of that. This is just to talk about mask sizes. And again, it seems really obvious, but I've got some small babies here with me today. And this baby in front of me is 500 grams of baby. It's to represent a 22, 23 week baby. It's about the size of my hand. And you'll see that because we've reduced the gestational age now down to 22 or 23 weeks, a lot of the equipment that's being used doesn't necessarily fit them. So again, we're using simulation now to test our equipment, to make sure we've got the right skills, and to test the members of staff that work for us. This video, I'm hoping it will play okay, and fingers crossed it will. This shows you how I personalize stuff. So in this video, I'm just going to show you the use of the expert mode, and just to talk through the single versus the double-handed techniques and the things that we see. So in this mode, I've got my inspiratory and expiratory volume, my frequency, but also I can see here my mask leakage. So I'm going to squeeze the bag with one hand using a single-handed CE grip with the other hand, and you'll see that I've got leakage of around about 17%, and that's doing the best CE grip that I can manage. And my leakage remains around 20% all the time. I'm hoping you can see the numbers there. So I'm going to swap over and do a double-handed CE grip. So here we go. So double-handed CE grip to get the best seal I can. And now you can see that the leakage is down to 10%. 11% on that last squeeze. And we're backing down the volume, 9%. So adjusting the way that I hold the mask now using a double-handed technique has reduced my mask leakage by at least 10%. I love the concept of personalizing simulation, and it's been really interesting for me. I think this is my 5th conference this week. So I talk about having conference fatigue, but some of the things that have come out of this have been that people are struggling to get experienced clinicians to engage in simulation. And so one of the big things has been, well, how can we get older, experienced people involved? And we see this as one of those ways that, you know, we can show them how they can actually improve their technique and give them real numbers that allow them to do a lot of that stuff. Oh, it's going to play again. Another area that we're always concerned about is how we can use simulation to address things that just don't feel right. And so again, recent studies have been coming out saying less women survive CPR than men. And when you start to look into that, how does that make any sense? And if you delve into further and further papers, you'll find that they talk then in even more detail about the fact that not only do less women survive, but less women receive bystander CPR than men. And so there's this whole health inequality that exists around just the basics of basic life support and who receives basic life support. And there seems to be some gender inequality, which is something that, again, we believe has either been caused through simulation or may be able to be sorted out through the world of simulation. So a little team in Australia started working on some solutions, and they felt that because the Manikins now, the Laird or Little Annie is quite flat-chested, she doesn't represent a real woman, she doesn't have hair, there's a lot of other things that don't make her appear real. They made these little skins that you can just slot over the top of your BLS mannequin to turn it into something that means more to the individuals. I use these, but in my teaching, I'll also put a little pacemaking box underneath so I can have a discussion about how we do that. I'll put a GTN patch on, and I will consider piercing as well, so that we can actually have more detailed discussions using a BLS mannequin, but actually covering a lot of those other areas that may be the causes as to why we see less bystander CPR. I will say that it gets much worse when you go out to the Middle East. So if you were to go to areas of the Middle East, such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, then again, it's far worse for ladies over there in terms of who receives CPR. So we see simulation as a tool to address a lot of these inequality areas that exist in the world of medicine. I'm going to talk, this one's quite emotional in places, so I've put a warning on. I'm going to talk you through a project that was done by a team over in the UK. And they were using a simulation-based curriculum. And so it was for a team of oncologists. And what they wanted to be able to do was to have a mannequin that represented one of the students. So we made them a young female. She had blonde hair and she looked like one of them. Over the course of a few months, the patient got worse. She underwent her treatment on a daily basis. And they would do a simulation at the start of the day, and then the rest of the day would be spent doing the human factors, would be doing the pharmacology, would be doing whatever needed to be done during that day. And they would spend the day dissecting how the simulation had gone. And this carried on for a number of months. And then the final part was obviously that the patient died, and they broke bad news to the family and did all of that stuff. Prepared the patient herself for dying. They practiced last offices. They did all of the things that you would do with a real person who was going through that process. And it taught me so much about how we can improve the way that we as learners engage. But it also got me to focus on that real emotional side, that these students had time to build a relationship with their mannequin. They knew who she was, they knew her family, they had this whole thing going on. It's so powerful. You'll see that our mannequins move like real people, the tidal volumes you've already seen. And again, from an intubation point of view, they're not as easy as the lead or stuff. They're designed to be a little bit anterior and a little bit long, but they're very realistic. I think from a simulation point of view, it's probably one of the most powerful sims I've ever been involved with. We're using simulation to tackle other health inequalities. And again, most resuscitation mannequins for 40 years have been white, Caucasian mannequins. And they don't necessarily reflect our workforce. They don't necessarily reflect our client load. So again, what we're able to do, and we'll explain how in a little bit, is we actually copy real people. And because we work with artists, both at Christina's team and here in the UK, we've got artists that work for us, we can change everything pretty much. We can do post-mortem livability, we can introduce all sorts of scarring or other pieces within the mannequin that we want to do. But we won't take a white person and change just their skin tone. We're going to capture their entire features and make them look like the person they're supposed to be. This project was one of my fun ones. I had to do a tracheostomy trainer for some parents. It was for parental education. And the more I thought about it, I thought, why are mannequins miserable? Why every time I look at a mannequin, is it miserable? Surely if I was going to teach a parent, I'd want a mannequin that looks happy about having its tracheostomy trained. So that was again one of the ones that we did. We've spoken about this already, but it's not unusual for us to put genital piercings in on men or to put piercings in other parts of the anatomy so that students can get used to taking those things out on mannequins rather than on real people. it seems really obvious, but this presentation is called, Mannequins Like Us. And I think it's really, really important that we accept that there are so many things that we can do to elicit conversation with our learners and to start having discussions about, okay, well, what do we look like? And, how do we respond? And this is a really cheap one. And I went online to check my pricing this morning. So for 5 bottles of tooth enamel, which would give you green and black and yellow and all the horrible colors that you could possibly imagine your teeth going, for 5 bottles, it was £24. So you can get this stuff. It's like toothpaste. You just rub it on the teeth and it produces these horrible colors. And the reason for this is it actually creates a bias. And so when you're going in to intubate a mannequin, it's got lovely white teeth, it's really easy. And you don't think about carious teeth and you don't think, am I going to knock these teeth out? And you don't worry about those things. But just by applying a little bit of lacquer, you see a change in the student's behavior. And we can use it on mannequins, or we can use it on standardized patients. It's not expensive, but it does make the simulation stuff start to be a bit more real. I'll move on to the next slide. Good, okay. Skull cap. So this is like a bathing cap. Basically, you can buy the skull cap, you pull it over your head, and then you just blend in. And I think if I can use my mouse, you can probably just make out where it's blended in around here. So we just use a little bit of makeup to blend in the skull cap. In this case, they were teaching about headache, and they wanted to do post-surgical headache. What's it all about? And so they got one of the students, brought him in, put the skull cap on, blended it in, and now there's somebody sitting in the room with this visual scarring through his head saying, I've got a headache and I don't feel very well. How fantastic. And again, £16 is the cost of the skull cap. The cost of the imagination and the time, well, that's priceless. But I just love the way that people are thinking differently about the way that we do simulation. It's not expensive. This would be a whole day focused on headache. But what an amazing way of doing it. David Gabber is one of the sort of most published authors. And I suppose I go back to the point of 2004 when I started reading his stuff. And he produced this seminal text, which I get a lot of my students to read, where he talks about what is simulation. He uses a definition. And as part of that, he says, it's a technique and it's not a technology. And it's designed to replicate what goes on in the real world. And I've sort of taken that forwards as my mantra, that it is all about technique. You could have a mannequin with blinking eyes, but you'll probably find something off-putting about that mannequin, just as much as you do when you've got a mannequin that doesn't have blinking eyes. You'll find that the compressor's making a noise, or there'll be something that loses that buy-in for you. I think so many people are confused between high fidelity, and they equate that to a lot of expense and a lot of technology. And actually, high fidelity is just close to realism. So, you can't get any closer to realism than an actor or an actress, probably a lot of the time, or standardized patient. But if we are going down in the list, then this technology stuff maybe features a lot lower down in our thinking. Christina, do you want to say anything while I grab a quick?
Yeah, get your tea. Just on that note, I know just clinically, when I was practicing, some of my best scenarios and my most memorable teaching moments were being immersed in a realistic environment with some of the simplest, more realistic tools. I find sometimes we tend to overcomplicate it when if you just layer in some simple realistic features and have that build up for it, that pre-brief, those are some of your most memorable takeaways. So I think realism and full immersion is just it's key sometimes to getting these points across.
I didn't realize my glass would appear completely see-through. It's very strange. There we go. Okay.
Although
Fantastic.
It is UK time, right?
It is UK time. And it is Harry Potter land where I work. So you can do stuff like that. Right. Thinking about simulation, let's go back to it. Historically, we were all about assessing individuals. We would do OSCEs for individual students and all of that stuff. And we had simulation being OSCE, that's what it was used for. I think luckily the pandemic's shown people that we're so much more than that. We can do so much more. We can test systems. We can have a patient with SARS or Ebola brought into the hospital and test the flow of the hospital and see how it works. And I think the COVID-19 has been one of those really great examples for us. We were involved in transferring patients across London initially when they first had the first few patients. Everybody was worried about what was it going to do and how would it behave and what could we do. So we did tests, we ran simulations across the entire scope of London just to make sure that things would or wouldn't be safe. I think now we're seeing it simulation become far more grown up than it's probably ever been in the past. And now we're seeing simulation being used to research everything, pretty much anything that we do now. We want to run it in simulation first. We want to test our hospital. We'll make a model of the hospital and we'll test the flow. We'll do one in virtual reality and we'll test the flow of the hospital. And I think we're seeing so much more for simulationists than we've ever done before. And I think the great thing is managers and others are starting to take us seriously now. Whereas, 10 years ago, oh yeah, you like playing with your dollies. It's moved from that world now where people are actually coming to us saying, please, can you test this for me? Can you ensure that my staff will be safe at the end of this process? So I think we're starting to become grown up. This is the sort of work that we do every day. We're able to copy pretty much anybody from any age and turn them into a mannequin. The smallest ones we've done so far would be something like the little fetus at the bottom, around about the 9-week gestation fetus. And we go right up to our 84-year-old older lady, a lady called Vivian. This is what Vivian Mannequin looks like. She's pretty amazing. The first one we made was about 3 years ago. And I was at Elstree, we were in a conversation. Vivian had been an empress in Star Wars Episode 9. She's 84-year-old, she teaches dance, she's a trained psychologist, and she earns over $1,000 a day as an actress. And that's not bad if you're in your 80s. There's something to be, to be amazed by, I guess. And the most amazing thing for us was that I was sitting talking to her and we were talking about older people. And she said, I hate the word geriatric. I'm really not a fan of this wording. I'm just older than you, David. And I said, yeah, okay, I'm with you on that one. You are a bit older than me. I said, have you ever thought about, us borrowing your body and turning you into a mannequin? And she said, no, I've got no worry about that at all. So that's what we did. We borrowed Vivian, but she also did a little bit to camera. So I'm going to share that with you.
Hello, my name's Vivian, and I'm probably the oldest one. I work as an actor, I was a dancer, and I also am a trained psychologist. So there are all sorts of odd things about me. Including the fact that you've got a very ancient, skinny body, and I hope you enjoy me.
Vivian was super brave. She had to lay naked on a table and she had to have a team pushing orange stuff in every orifice to copy her body. And now there are hundreds of Vivian mannequins around the world. And, we're very privileged to be able to do that. I'll show you, I'm only going to show you Vivian's head being cast, but just so you've got an idea. And she wasn't paid for this. She volunteered. She's not dead. She's very much alive.
Johnny good.
She went skydiving for her 80th birthday. It's just a perfect example of what it means to be a bit older than you and I.
In your mouth now. You can breathe through your nose, can't you, at the moment? Yes. Open your mouth.
Now, Vivian has to stay like this for about 20 minutes. So she's covered in this orange stuff. We have to let that dry. Then we put plaster of Paris over the outside of that. And then we actually strap her to some boards, just so that she doesn't move too much. So, but you can see why the mannequin's mouth is open, because Vivian had to be able to breathe. It's not pleasant. It's really not pleasant. But just amazing when these people say, yeah, you can turn me into a mannequin. You can have my body for medical education. The other technique we use is that of 3D scanning, and this is obviously a far less invasive. It's something that just involves a handheld 3D scanner, and we copy people using this technique. This camera takes about 3,000 photos a minute. And then what we do is we print off using a 3D printer the model that we get from this, and then we make molds from that. So it's still quite a lot of work. It doesn't make it much quicker to use this technique, but obviously for the Tom Hankses of the world, it means that they're not covered in orange gloop anymore. So they're a lot more popular. So there's the 3D files. And then this is the mannequin that we produced as a result of that. This is us doing time editing for the film Kingsman. And all of the bodies in Kingsman that you see coming out in the water, we made every single one of those. So again, this is the 3D scan of him. It's an amazing place to work. I work with some incredible people. You know, I don't profess to understand half of what they get up to. I really don't. You know, I look at it every day and say, okay, well, I'd really like, in my collection, I'd really like somebody with Down syndrome. In my collection, I'd really like somebody with kyphoscoliotic scoliosis. So, and you know, and we go out and we find those individuals so that we can build these mannequins that give us what we want to see and what we want to be able to teach in the future. Once we've got a mannequin, probably the other things to talk about are giving them personality. So most of our mannequins are dressed, okay? It's very rare that you'll see a life cast mannequin that's without clothing, because I don't walk through the hospital and see lots of naked people either. If I look at some military moulage quite often, I'll see somebody naked lying in the middle of a battlefield, and I think, well, that's a bit odd. That wouldn't normally happen. So again, I think a really big part is to just dress your mannequins, give them personalities, give them eyeglasses, give them earrings, you know, give them religious artifacts, whatever those would be, you know, if it's crosses, if it's whatever would fit with that individual. If you're dealing with babies, give them nappies to wear. The Indian lady on the floor, you'll see that she's got the entire Indian wear on, but she's also got gold earrings in, she's got gold jewelry on, and she's got a bindi spot, again, for her religious and for her married status. And we just love the way that mannequins can now start to give you this sort of story, this personalization that we've not been really very good at in the past. Christina, anything from you while I slurp another glass of water?
Yeah, I just love that we're really taking the word imagine out of our vocabulary when we're going into simulation with these mannequins. You're no longer saying imagine 80-year-old female, imagine a 15-year-old teenager, or a 2 to 3-year-old toddler. We're giving you that, and I love that they all have a backstory and a personality. We're no longer kind of giving you a mannequin with features that we're saying it does this, this, and this. We come to you now and we say, what's important to you in your curriculum, and how can we now facilitate that and bring that to you? So each mannequin is unique. They're all hand painted, artist created. No two mannequins are alike, and you really do get a work of art. And we personalize them to your needs and your specifications. So it gives just a life story to your scenarios, and it just brings in that back history and that belief.
Yeah. The other thing that Christina's team have been doing, Echo Healthcare, based down in Sarasota in Florida, is they produce the Echo mask. And again, I'm a big fan of this. So you take your SimMan 3G and you put a mask over its head. And now it becomes that 55-year-old man that looks a little bit more like me, or it becomes a 55-year-old woman, or it becomes a 20-year-old Hispanic male, or whatever else you want it to be. And it means that you can take your white Caucasian SimMan and make him whatever you want to make him. And I just think, thank God somebody's done this stuff for us, because it's been such a pain when you're asking people, well, please think of it in this way, or please think of it in that way. It's just an amazing tool. Christina, sorry.
That's okay. Feel free to visit the website. There's multiple pictures on there. It's really transformative. So CAE Laerdal, Gomard, any of your traditional mannequins, anything with a 21-inch to 25-inch head circumference. The females actually come with full breast tissue, so now you can change one of your male mannequins into a female. We can even hollow out the breast tissue, so you can put in different kind of palpable pathologies and lesions for them to find on assessment. And it's a remarkable transformation, and it really does bring a new face to your mannequins and gives them a facelift. And again, it creates that just belief in the story, and it kind of correlates what your pre-brief is into your simulation. And so there is no more, just imagine.
We should have called it Just Imagine, shouldn't we? Mask Ed, these guys based out in Australia, I love them. If you've never seen them, please type in Mask Ed onto YouTube. They use the same thing. So they're using a mask, they're putting it over themselves, and you get young tutors going into a classroom with this old stuff on and giving a lecture about geriatrics, looking like a geriatric older person. And they will walk around the campus dressed as an old person and look at how people react to them, and then bring all of that into the learning. Some really, really interesting cutting edge stuff. And I know that I've seen Kevin from Christina's team wearing the echo masks in exactly the same way.
It's amazing to see, like, I know Kevin, our CEO, he did it at a conference, and he even kind of came in and remarked about, just how he was treated differently, and how people's perception of him changed. So again, tackling some of those unconscious biases that you don't recognize. You can dress people just slightly different. As Dave mentioned, put that teeth lacquer on. And then, they could be in a 3-piece business suit, but you put that teeth lacquer on and you're kind of like, oh, and you don't realize you're doing it, as you're doing it, but then after, as you kind of just, they call it A/B testing. So you change one specific characteristic and just see how that influences the dynamic of the scenario.
Yeah. Okay. We like to add wounds. I'm sure everybody does in sim, but we're trying to now get a bit clever about that. So things like lumps and bumps, closed fractures, dislocated kneecaps. We still do the blood and gore stuff, but we've started this hashtag Simology, this brand called Simology, because we want to get away from the traditional of just having gunshot wounds and other stuff that's fairly straightforward. We wanted to move it towards the clinically quite complex. So we're doing raised JVPs, we're doing shifted tracheas, we're doing, as I said, closed fractures of clavicle, we're doing dislocated kneecaps, POTS fractures, all of the things that actually create challenges on a daily basis. After 30 years of simulating people or being simulated as a student, I'd say that I've tried to distill it down to 3 areas for us to focus on. And I know we're in the last 10 minutes or so of the presentation. So if you get your environment right for the sim, and if you get your equipment right, so that's your mannequins, all of the kit that people would use on a daily basis, and if you get your relationship between yourself and the student right, so that's our pre-brief, our orientations, our debriefing, our psychological safety, if you get those 3 areas of this triangle right, and you put effort into all 3, then you'll get this student buy-in stuff. And there's always work we can do to just try and neaten up each of these areas. For us, we've spent certainly the last 10 years building tools to allow us to do some of that stuff. My most recent journey has been in building mannequins that will work in any environment. So in this case, we were in the rivers in North Wales recently, and we were putting mannequins in there. We've built advanced life support mannequins that will work underwater, and for things like this scenario here for water rescue. Again, we've had a lot of interest out of the teams in Canada with the ice thaws that are coming or are there at the moment, and lots of interest in body recovery from those areas. It's a fascinating area, but what we see is that people behave differently depending on the environment that we find themselves in. Christina and her team have been working with immersive classrooms, and I was really lucky to be involved with this at the very beginning when it was literally just a tent. But I'm going to hand over to Christina so you can talk guys through.
Yeah, so we're putting people in their realistic, identical setups. So you're going to practice identically to how you work. You can still utilize all of your existing equipment. So our mannequins, your traditional high fidelity mannequins, your crash carts, your defibs, everything that you would normally tactilely be utilizing. But now we're going to put you in your clinically identical environment. And how we do that is it's a projector-based room. The walls are all interactive, so you can create in different touch pots, hotspots and layering. But the beauty of this is we give you a 360 camera that now you're able to create and capture your ERs, your ORs, your L&Ds, your EMS vehicles, any of your allied health professions and their environments, and now immerse them in that. So with the sights, the sounds, and even the smells, so we have urine and cautery, a sports locker, I think was one of them in a plane crash. It's quite dynamic what we can come up with. But again, you're just walking in and now you're in it and you're practicing identically to how you work with all of your regular equipment that you would use. So here you can see we've been able to go from home environments, this is all the same room, to accident sites and sports fields, all the way through to now we're in an L&D suite. There was a birthing tub. And as we walk through, you're going to see, this is David Salt, he's the creator of Immersive, and he was able to touch out for more information. So the walls are virtually interactive. You can bring down any image or any video, any CT scan. The next slide after this is actually my favorite so far. It's where you can be in a pediatric trauma suite and you can literally see the mechanism of injury happen. I think we have a little delay here, but as it speeds up, you'll see that there's a child on a bike and you can see him at this little bike park. And this is it coming up and he's getting on his bike and you're gonna say, you have this obtunded 8-year-old coming in. And here we can give you the visuals of the pre-brief and you can see that he falls off his bike at a 12-foot incline. He is helmeted, but he has a epidural hemorrhage, and then you can get all the labs and the diagnostics associated with it. So it's a nice creative way in one room that you can capture both your scenery, but you can also create it as a didactic learning space or a interactive boardroom. It's just full flexibility based on your needs and how you want to customize it.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? I mean, it's just a 360 camera, walk into an environment, capture that environment, play it back on the walls. That's the beauty of it. So you can orientate people to any workplace. If they want to practice Ward 4 versus Ward 27 of a hospital, you can actually capture each of those and then just project it up around the walls. Unbelievable in terms of how students behave with that, and great for orientation if you're bringing people into an environment that they wouldn't normally work in. It's fantastic. It also means that your sim suite can become part of the hospital because you can bring the hospital in visually into your environment as well. We've done the same with this little concept here. This is what we call a foldaway space or a life space. So they're actually display boards and we had them made up to look like an ambulance. And then when you don't need it again, you just fold it away. You just put it back against the side of the wall. But we're seeing that, again, confined space will change your behavior. And the back of an ambulance is a confined space, an emergency department bed space is a confined space. Probably most of the areas that we perform in every day is slightly confined when the curtains come around. And so the beauty of this is it's just the ambulance printed on the inside and the outside. And then the students are put in there and we can watch them and see how they behave in relation to stuff like this. Not expensive, but very, very effective. And that's really, I guess, the most important part of our journey. I'm quite often getting blocked on social media for some of the stuff that I post. And I just put another warning slide up just to talk about some areas that are quite contentious in the world of simulation. But again, I think, as I said before, we're trying to address health inequalities where we can. One of the mannequins that we made was a very small, simple mannequin, this one here. And we made it because we learned that miscarried babies, dead babies, very small, were being transported to hospital in vomit bowls. And we just couldn't understand why. And so we made a little mannequin of it, put it in a vomit bowl, went into a paramedic class and said, is this acceptable? And overnight, those individuals were then complaining to their line managers that it's not appropriate and we need to have little, the right appropriate tools to be able to transport these little babies, and it's not right for the mother. Transformed the way that practice happened, and it was one simple mannequin that did it.
I can tell you, I wish I had that when I was clinically active. We used to do it in plastic bags, and just the trauma to the mom was just overwhelming. So yeah.
as the gestational age has gone down, so we've had to make smaller and smaller and smaller mannequins. And now the gestational age here in the UK is 22 to 23 weeks, which is this sort of size, I said, about the size of my palm. And it weighs 500 grams. And again, we're doing mannequins now that are that small that you can still have emotional connection with, I suppose. We do spend a lot of time talking about breaking bad news. And I think in most people's minds, that's talking about the elderly. We've done a lot of stuff now where it's breaking bad news in terms of having babies that are due to die. And actually, we've got a program over here called The Day the Simulator Died, which is one of those. We've also got some child abuse simulations. So again, battered baby syndrome is one that's done as a simulation over here. Very, very powerful stuff. It just needs managing well. Okay, the last field. Sorry, Christina, go on.
Oh, it was okay. I was just going to point out, I had a friend saying to me, she did miscarry around the 25-week gestation mark. And she said the worst thing was everybody pretended it didn't happen. So for her point was to recognize it, acknowledge it, and give it, respect, I think is something that you can just leave a lasting memory with those people that are affected.
And in my training, I wasn't taught how to deal with it. I remember breaking bad news to a young girl of 16 who'd lost a baby down the toilet, and I would have been about 19 or 20 at the time. And, how do you do that? And now we can prepare them. We've got the tools. And I think, that's how I see our role, really, is just helping people by giving them the tools to be able to do that sort of education.
And that's where I really, oh, sorry, Dave. I was just gonna say, I really love this. And a lot of the times when I talk to customers, I always talk to them, it's not about just the tactile, physical, what you can do with the mannequin. Sometimes it's these softer skills of how we can have these communication pieces. Handoffs are specifically important, end of life care, some of these more difficult conversations, again, to prep your students to be able to have them. I mean, I would say in my early 20s when I first started, and I wasn't prepared to have these conversations, and the only way I became prepared was through experience and having some really great preceptors along the way to show me how to tackle it head on versus trying to hide away from it.
Yeah. And getting it wrong, I'm sure, a few times. So last few slides, prepare students for reality. I mean, as I've already explained, that a 3 mil tidal volume versus a 5 mil, that takes time to teach what that actually means. We like adding cultural stuff to our mannequins. We think we are living in a multicultural society. It's really great to be able to do Indigenous populations and all of that stuff that needs to be addressed. Obviously, there's the gender issues. We're able to put on previous medical history. I've seen some fantastic, sternotomy scars, old ones, and with the saphenous vein culture and all of that stuff on the mannequins, which again just gives them layers and layers of history. They've got a previous cardiac history, and you can see it on the outside of their body. This lady with the bindi spot, you can probably just make out she's had a previous mastectomy, and she's actually having a new breast put in place. And again, there's part of that history there with that particular mannequin. We love medical challenges. I mean, again, how great to have a tracheostomy mannequin that's actually looks like somebody who would have a tracheostomy in. And again, that could be a partial or a full, could be whatever you want it to be. But again, I wasn't trained for changing trachea tubes. At no point in my training was I trained to be able to deal with that, but you get sent to it regularly, so you have to learn on the job. And the ethical stuff is the final one now. We're able to tattoo mannequins up to have some of these things. And how great is it that we can, take the stuff that's happening? I think this was based on a lady in Holland who had herself tattooed. And it was a real case, and there was a lot of issue around changing the law in Holland at the time. And we just had one of the universities here in the UK say, can you do me a DNAR tattoo? And now we're seeing those going out quite regularly for clients where they want to be able to have that ethical conversation with their students about, well, what does it mean? Was she of sound mind at the time she had the tattoo? Did her family have a tattoo? Where do we go with this stuff? It's mind-blowing, but it's, again, the ability to be helpful, to have that conversation as a result of a mannequin is the bit that we love. I put this slide in, and I'm working it through in my head. And one of the areas I've always wondered about is, how do I make decisions about who's sick? Big sick, little sick. How do I make that decision? I think it's because I've seen a lot of healthy people, and then I can recognize somebody who's unhealthy. I think that's how I was taught. And I would read books and I would look at pictures of unhealthy people. Now they've got the internet, it should be a lot easier to do, and there's videos and stuff like that. But I think we can make mannequins that look poorly. And so again, I would say, you know, please have a think about that. We do them with, now we do babies with post-mortem staining. We do children with signs of abuse. We do elderly with cellulitis legs. We'll do whatever your program needs to be able to get those messages across. We're doing Pierre Robin, difficult airway babies, and so many different things now that people come to us and say, can you build me a whatever it happens to be. 50 years ago, I found this mannequin the other day. I went to see some friends of mine. They had this. This was a lump of wood, but it was used for mine rescue 50 years ago. That was it. That was the best they had. And you know, these days we have these soft, flexible polymer stuff that looks like people that we can immerse in water. There's so much more we're able to do with our mannequins than before. The people that will make the change are you guys, you know, and Christina and I said at the beginning, it's a great privilege to come and talk to you today, because it's you that are the people that can say, do you know what, I think I will do what David said. I think I will put some piercings in, or I think I will get my mannequins tattooed, or I think I will just mix things up a little bit just to see what happens. You'll be amazed at what you see and how that direction takes you, slightly different than the more traditional plastic stuff that certainly I was brought up with. And I used to spend £400,000 a year with the company that start with an L on mannequins for my tutors, and they break them most years. So again, I feel the pain of probably everybody on this call. I'm going to hand back now to Laura. So I'll say thank you. I think that was the last slide. I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Dave and Christina. A huge, huge, huge thank you. This was wonderful. We appreciate you both joining us today. Any questions? We do have a couple of minutes. Any questions that anyone wanted to ask? You're welcome to unmute and ask. Well, I know I was certainly amazed. And Erica, any questions in the chat?
Not that I see. There's been a lot of really great dialogue. Katie's also jumped in to put her email. If you want to get further information about some of their products, I would reach out to her.
I can see one from Lynn about a teenager. We do a teenage girl now. She's 19, she's not 19, she's 17, she's Afro-Caribbean. So we did a teenage girl. We've also done a teenage boy, a guy called Louis, but he's not come out the other end of the process yet. It takes us about 16 weeks from putting somebody in at the start to getting them out the other end. But we are working on the teenager because again, we agree with you, there's not enough teenagers out there. So we're definitely doing a teenager. Are there any others that you would say, oh, you know, we're desperate for one of these? As I said, Downs, kyphoscoliotic scoliosis were the two. And for the airway people, it was the Pierre Robin was the one that everybody was excited about.
So this is Jeannie Carey, and I'm the Director of Simulation at the Louise Harrington School of Nursing for Baylor University, and we are fortunate enough to have 8 of your guys' mannequins, and
Wow.
we love them. So with this spot, a lot of people that are on this call are not that far away from us, and you guys are welcome to come visit anytime you want. But the team was just amazing to work with. I'm really bummed that I didn't get down to Sarasota when ours were being, I hate saying built, but when they were being created, that's a better word. When they were being created, because I really wanted to just go see it in action, but that was sort of when COVID was at its peak. But we got a grant, and the grant was all focused on increasing realism in our labs as a way to engage students. And so we have 8 very unique mannequins, and one of them, you know, we designed them according to specific patient profiles that we had, but one of them we really didn't have a profile for, so we told the artisans to just have fun And she actually ended up looking more like a 16-year-old girl. She's got freckles across her face. And so she's actually down in our PD lab because she does look like she's 16. So she's now Kylie. And her history is that she's got cystic fibrosis. And at the age of 16, she's being a little bit non-compliant. But yeah, the impact's been pretty amazing.
Jeannie, thank you so much for that invitation. That's wonderful. Erica, are you ready to finish up then if there's no other questions?
I am ready because we are kind of pushing time, so I may have to go through this bit a little quickly. I know some of you have already jumped off, but if you're still hanging out here with us, we want to send a survey to you to kind of get an idea of what's going to work best moving into the future as far as meeting your needs. I know COVID has changed a lot of our lives, a lot of our work structure as well. I'm going to drop a link in here so that way you can have access to the form. It'll take 2 to 3 minutes at most, but again, it's just giving us an idea of what's going to work best so that way we can start planning as the committee for the future and presentations that are going to be coming up. Another reminder, so the GoFundMe, there's a link, there's also the QR code. I'm going to drop another link in there. I already can see that some people have donated. We absolutely appreciate that. We love your support and your appreciation. And this is what's really going to keep SPOT going into the future. Just as a heads up, our social media platforms, there's our email there if you want to email us at any point in time. Check out our website, share our website, also our Facebook and our LinkedIn. As far as upcoming meetings that we have planned, we're looking to do a summer quarterly meeting at either in July or August. More information will come about that in the future, and to end the year off in November as well. Let me drop some more links so that way you can have access to that information. So you got our Facebook there, you got our LinkedIn and our website. Again, we do appreciate everybody's support and time. And then I'm going to linger around if Laura's okay with it, just to kind of help answer any questions. Keep these links up here, and we hope to see you in the future. And thank you so much again, Dave and Christina. This was a very spectacular presentation. I know I had a lot of fun watching it, and there's a lot of really great use that I can see in simulation.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. That concludes our meeting. We will stay on a little bit longer if anyone has anything else they'd like to ask.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Oh, I'm already seeing some responses. That's awesome for future planning. That's great.